Today we're going to learn Masechet Kiddushin, Daf Yud Bet. We're going to get started from the end of yesterday's daf. So we're in the middle of this third explanation of Beit Shammai, who said like Chizkiah. Okay, Rish Lakish says he must be explaining it like Chizkiah. Okay, let's just review. We had three explanations. The first one was Isha Makpedet al Atzma, that was Rabbi Zera, that a woman has a certain amount of self-worth and wouldn't agree to be betrothed for less than a dinar. Then remember, dinar and pruta are very different. We have 192 prutot in a dinar, and that's the difference between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, a huge difference. Second option was to say that he holds like Rav Asi, or his understanding is like that we see of Rav Asi, that any money in the Torah is the kesef tzuli, and the smallest coin in the matbea tzuli in that currency is the dinar. That gets rejected in the end because it can't possibly be that Rav Asi held like Beit Shammai. And the third is Rish Lakish, who says it's based on this Amai V'riyah. Now, the Amai V'riyah says vehefda, when she gets redeemed, the subject of that verb is that he redeems her, but it doesn't really mean, or somehow the owner is involved in that verb, to which they say that it must be what's his involvement? That magrat v'azla ad pruta. That means he deducts the amount that she worked when she buys herself out or leaves, right? Or someone else buys her out. The owner deducts the amount of work that she already did, which means that there has to be a deduction. Now, if he acquired her for a pruta, there's no room for any deduction, to which the Gemara, we ended with a question, maybe when she was sold for a dinar and there's room for deduction, he deducts. But when there isn't, he doesn't, and maybe really he could buy her for a pruta. And we still didn't yet connect this with we were talking about an Amai V'riyah, we weren't talking about betrothal, but in a minute we'll get to the connection to the betrothal. So starting now from the top of our daf, the Gemara rejects that question. It says, lo salkadata. It can't be that it's a possibility. It could be a possibility there's gera on, there's what to deduct, or it could be a possibility not, because you wouldn't think that, because it's dumia de yehud. It's just like it has to be similar to other laws of Amai V'riyah, of a Jewish maidservant, which is the halach of yehud, which is she can become designated to her to the owner as a wife or to his son. Well, my Yehud afagav dibai miyad dibai lo miyad. By Yehud, theoretically, he could decide he wants to. He could decide later he doesn't want to marry her off to himself or to the son. Well, even though he can decide either or, kol hecha de lo matzi miyad lo haviz v'nizvini. But if there's no potential for that, then the sale is not a sale. If he acquires in Amai V'riyah, who's, let's say, a relative that he's not allowed to marry, one of the arayot, that's a totally invalid act of buying her. It doesn't work. It has to be that there's potential. So just like there has to be potential. Hachanami, likewise here, we'll say, if there's nothing to deduct, there has to be potential to deduct. So that means he cannot acquire her for a pruta. To which case they now say, well, if that's the case, and here we finally make the connection to Kiddushin, the Kiddushin of a woman, Beit Shammai learns out from the Amai V'riyah. Just like an Amai V'riyah can't be acquired by a pruta, and that's the third explanation of Beit Shammai. Also, a woman can't be acquired for a pruta. But the Gemara is going to have a question with this. But there's another possibility, which is ema palga de dinar ve'ema shtei prutot. So now we have, what about half a dinar? What about 2 prutot? There's a lot between a pruta and a dinar. So it just has to have the option for deducting something. So how could that be? To which they actually resolve. Since they got rid of the pruta, and as they said, a pruta doesn't work, they went up to the next full coin of the next currency up, and that was a dinar. And therefore, they got to a dinar. Fourth explanation of Beit Shammai. Rav Amar, Hainu Tama de Beit Shammai, Shalo Yehu B'not Yisrael Kehefker. This is a little bit similar to the first one, but the first answer was about the women having self-worth and they wouldn't be betrothed for less than that. This is concerned how it's going to look in the eyes of men. If men know that they can betroth a woman for a pruta, they might not take the institution of marriage seriously. And therefore, we up the price so that people take it seriously. So sometimes people do this in business where they jack up a price so that people actually think the item's not cheap, right? It could be a cheap item, but if they raise the price, it makes people think that the item actually is worth something. So same thing here. Moving on now to Beit Hillel. Beit Hillel bipruta. Sever of Yosef Lameimar pruta koldehu. Rav Yosef thought that he meant any pruta, meaning whatever currency you're in, right? If it's agurot, then it's an agura. If it's pennies, then it's a penny, right? Whatever currency you use. Amar le Abaye, what are you talking about? But doesn't it say in the Mishnah itself? Kama hi pruta, chamishmona b'isari talki. A pruta is 1/8 of the isari talki. And if you want to think that the Mishnah is talking about in the generation of Moshe, that's what it was valued at. But if it changes in value, you could actually do less. But here, but here it's whatever's important to people, right? If like it used to be, for example, in Israel, they were agurot. Agurot, they even had single agurot. Now you can only get a 10 agurot coin. In fact, most people even only use 50 agurot coins because they're just not worth anything. But at some point, it was worth something, right? So it could fluctuate. Well, it can't possibly be because it's not only in the time of Moshe, because we're going to have two rabbis who came from Israel and brought the Torah of Israel to Babylonia, and they each said something else, but they each gave it a value. He explains that Rabbi Simai in his generation assessed kama pruta echad mishmona b'isari talki. It was 1/8 of the isari talki. And when Ravin came, he told us that Rabbi Dostai, Rabbi Yanai, Rabbi Yoshaya, these are all Amoraim from Israel. Shiaru kama pruta chamishisha b'isari talki. He assessed it at 1/6. So either which way you see that it was assessed at a certain value, and the pruta is not just anything. So now, right, they gave it a minimum amount. So Amarle Rav Yosef says, well, if you're going to say that, it can't possibly be the pruto can never be less than that, like less than a certain amount, because Hainu ditanina say b'chashovinaz, it can't be only a 6 or only an 1/8 of an isar, because I'm going to show you where it's actually worth less. How so? It says in a Braita, say v'chashov kama prutot b'shnei slaim. This is in a context of me'ila. Me'ila is misuse of consecrated property. If you use it by accident, you have to bring a korban asham me'ila. And your asham, the amount you have to have used, it has to be a shavet pruta. But your korban has to be worth, the animal you buy has to be worth at least 2, let me just remember what it is, because of shkalim. It has to be 2 shkalim's worth, which is a lot more than a pruta. So now they say the following. He says, say v'chashov, okay, now go and calculate. Now he wants to basically, they want to say is, you should really be discouraged from doing this sin because kama prutot b'shnei slaim. You have to do 2 slaim. How many slaim? Slaim are, right, that's the shkalim, which is also, each sela is 4 dinarim. So basically you're going to end up with 8 dinarim times 196, right? Because we said there's 196 prutot in a dinar. Now, what are you going to get up to? We'll see later. The number is, you could just do the calculation, 1,536. So now he says, kama prutot b'shnei slaim, yoter me'alpayim. There's more than 1,000 prutot in 2 slaim. So for using something that's worth 1 prutot, you're going to have to pay more than 2,000. Did I say, right? More than 2,000 the amount in a sacrifice. Not worth it. So they say the following. What did we just come to our conclusion? How many prutot are in 2 slaim? 1,536, not 2,000. It's not even 2,000. How could they possibly say more than 2,000? Well, came among an elder and he explained. Now, by the way, what was Rav Yosef trying to prove? That clearly prutot could be even less than that, because here they're saying there's 2,000 prutot in a dinar, and that's not 1/6 or 1/8 of the isar. It's the 24 isarim in a dinar. No, 24 isarim in a me'ah. There's 24 isarim to a dinar. So if it's 1/8 or 1/6, again, we're going to get to 1,000. If it's 1/8, we're going to get to 1,536. If it's 1/6, we're going to get to a different amount, but either which way, it's not more than 2,000. So comes Rav Yosef to say, sometimes prutot were less than what we thought. So now this Sahu Saba says, no. It meant, right, my version says, karov la'alpayim, close to 2,000. To which the Gemara says, sof alpa v'chamish me'ah, v'taltim v'shita u'dahavyan. It's 1,536. So that's not even close to 2,000, to which they say, once it got over the 1,500 mark, they already considered it close to 2,000. We see lots of times in the Gemara that they estimate these values and use numbers that are not right, that are just kind of general. They didn't really take mathematics as clear-cut as we do, at least in many sugyot. Okay, Gufa. Now we're going to go into this comment about the 1/8 and the 1/6. So Rav Dimi brought Rabbi Dostai, who said it was 1/8. V'chiyata Ravin amar Shiur Rabbi Dostai v'Rabbi Yanai v'Rabbi Yoshaya kami purta echam mishisha b'isari taki, 1/6 of the isari taki. That's just what we saw before. Amar le'Abai le'Rav Dimi. Abai goes over to Rav Dimi and starts questioning him. Nema at v'Ravin beplugta dahane tonight kamifligitu. It sounds like you guys are having the same machloket as Tanaim had. Ditanya, as we see in a Braita. How is that? 1/8. Because now we're going to go through a whole long thing about different values of money. Shesh me'ah kesef dinar, meaning every dinar has 6 me'ah, which is spelled with an ayin, 6 coins that are called a me'ah. Me'ah shnei punyonim. Each me'ah has 2 punyonim. Punyon shnei isarim. Each punyon has 2 isarim. Isal shnei musmasin. Okay, that's how we get to that. An isar is 24 dinarim, because isar is 2 punyonim times 2 me'ah times 6 kesef. So 2 times 2 is 4 times 6 is 24. Now, isar is shnei musmasin. Shnei isarim. Punyon is shnei isarim. And isar is shnei musmasin. A mismes is shnei kontriknin. Kuntrak shnei prutot. Okay, and we go on, then on, and then on. Now, what you want to figure out is what's the relationship between a pruta and an isar. So a pruta is 2 country, right? Is half a country con, and that's half a mismes, right? So it's a quarter. One pruta is a quarter of a mismes, and a musmasin are 2 isarim. So you get to another times 2, you get to 1/8. So it's 1/8 of a punyon. That's how we got to that. 1/8 of an isar. So now they say, Nimtza pruta chamishmona b'isarei taki. That's Tanakama, which seems to match Rav Dimi. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel omer shlosha hadrasin leme'ah. Now they start getting into different. A me'ah is, remember, 6 me'ah to a dinar. Well, there's 3 hadrasin in a me'ah. Shnei hensin lahadris, and then there's 3 hensim in a hadris. Okay, again, now we're talking about different coins. Shnei leme'ah shnei hanatzim. I said that wrong. So again, let's start. 3 hadrasim to a me'ah. No, shlosha hadrasim leme'ah, which is shnei hensim lahadris, which is shnei shmanim lehens. There's 2 shmanim and a hens, which is 2 prutot leshamin. Okay, so 2 prutot is 1 shamin. Nimtza pruta achad b'shisha b'isar ha'italki. Okay, so here it's a little bit more complicated because here we're getting out of the different coins that we were at least getting a little familiar with. Okay, and for this, what we're going to say is, right, 1 me'ah is 3 handrasim, which is 6 hanetzim, which is 12 shmanim, which is 24 prutot. So in every me'ah, we're going to have 24 prutot. And there's 4 isarim. This it doesn't say here, but there's 4 isurim in a me'ah. So therefore, we're going to end up with 24 prutot in a me'ah, which is 4 isarim. So each isal is 1/6. And therefore, you get to 1/6. So now they say, Nimtza pruta chamishisha b'isara italki. To which the Gemara says, so Lema Demara, right? This is what they said. Who said this? Abai said, Lema Demara, Amar Katanakama, V'Ravin da Amar Karashbag. It sounds like that's the way to split. So Amar Le says, no. Bain Ledidi, Bain Didi, Bain Ravin. Rav Dimi answers Abai and says, also me and also Ravin, Aliba de Tanakama, Velo Kasha. Okay, we both hold like Tanakama, and don't be confused by this, because the fact that you got to 1/8, Ravin can also get to 1/6 from here. Why? Hadi iyakir isare, hadi zol isare. Okay, isure, but it really should be isare. So what does that mean? Hadi iyakir isure, which is sometimes the isar changed value. The pruta was always 192 dinarim, but the middle number, the isal, which we said relationship is 1/8 or 1/6, well, that could change because the value of the isar could change. So there was a time, right? The first one was talking about when Hadi Iyakir Isure, when they were worth more the Isarim, Kum Esrim Ba'arba Bezuze, there were 24 to a zuz. And then the punyon would be 1/8, the coin, right? The prutat would be 1/8 of that. Hadizol, but when it got less value, Kum taltim v'tartim b'zuzah. There were 32 in a zuz, but you still had 192 prutot in a zuz, and that remained the same. So therefore, its relationship to the isar would change to 1/6. But only the isar's value changed, not anything else. And that's how we resolve that. It's not a machloket Tanaim. They both could hold like Tanakama, but explain it differently. Amar Shmuel. Now we're moving on to a different halakha. So that was all about, is a pruta called dehu, which is what Rabbi Yosef thought. And then they said, no, the pruta always has this set amount. And we started asking questions on it, but we seem to resolve that the pruta always has this set amount. You can't really question that from these other sources, like it's worth 2,000. It's really not worth 2,000. Don't take that literally. Now we're going to have this halakha of Shmuel. Amar Shmuel, kitcham b'tzma'a, afilu omeid kort marim b'dinar mikudesh. Until now, we assumed it has to be a shava pruta. What if he betroths her with a date? And even if dates are a whole core, which is a lot of money, is only for 1 dinar, sold for dinar, and that means that each pruta is not even worth a pruta. Mikudeshet. Now, you would have said, of course, she's not mikudeshet. So why is she mikudeshet here? Chayshinan shema shava pruta b'madai. We're worried that maybe this same date, in a place where, let's say, they don't have dates, for example, Madai, maybe dates weren't so common there, the price of dates was higher, and therefore, maybe there it's a shava pruta, and maybe we should be concerned. Now, the commentaries, most of them say, this only means she's mekudeshet misafek, which means she's a safek eshet ish, maybe not. She would be required to get a get from him if she wanted to marry anyone else out of a doubt. Okay, she's not definitely married, but she is safek. But wait, didn't we say pruta? So how can you possibly be worried that, oh, well, maybe somewhere it's a shava pruta? And now the Gemara says it explicitly. In order to be definitively betrothed, you need a pruta, but out of safek, we'll say even less than a pruta. So now we're going to have a whole bunch of situations and stories that happen. Okay, there was someone who betrothed his wife. Rashi says this is an agudah shel muchin. It's a bunch of wool put together, like a bundle of wool. Yativ Rav Shimi bar Chia kamei derav v'kama ayin ba. He started looking in front of Rav and started assessing how much is this worth? Is it a pruta or not? He says, "If it have a pruta, in ilo lo. If it has a value of a pruta, then yes. If not, not. V'ile have a pruta lo." So then he asks him, "What do you mean? If this doesn't have a shava pruta, who cares?" V'amar Shmuel. Remember, Shmuel says lo chayshinan, right? Shmuel says chayshinan. We're concerned that maybe somewhere else it might be worth a pruta. So what's the difference if it's not assessed here as a pruta? Could be somewhere else. So again, the answer same as before. Haba kiddushe vaday, haba kiddushe safek. He said, no, that's only to say maybe she's betrothed me safek. I want to know, is she definitely betrothed to him? So therefore, I need to know the value. Next story. We're going to have a whole bunch of stories till we get to the end of today's daf. So now we have a story. Ha'u gavra, there was a person da'akdish ba'avne de kuchla with blue marble stones. Yativ Rav Chisda become a shalale. So Rav Chisda again went to assess it, just like in the previous story. Someone else, but this time it's Rav Chisda. I'ibu shavapruta in ilo lo. Let's see what it's valued at. If it's shavapruta, they're betrothed. If not, no. V'hamar Shmuel chashinan. And again, they ask him, but doesn't Shmuel say we have to worry about maybe it's worth it somewhere, that value somewhere else? To which they answer, Rav Chisda lo savralik l'shmuel. He wasn't concerned for Shmuel at all. Okay, he didn't hold like Shmuel, and therefore he wanted to assess the amount. But what we're gonna understand here is Rashi tells us already, and it's very clear from the continuation of the Gemara that this is the story. Lefi sheba and dibor matchil yativ Rav Chisda b'kama ayin. What was he looking into? Because what happened in this story? Lefi sheba achil v'kidsha bepruta. Someone else came and betrothed her with the pruta afterwards. So now the question is she betrothed to person number 1 or person number 2? Okay, because if she's betrothed to person number 1, if maybe it really was a shava pruta, then the second kiddushin is nothing. If she wasn't betrothed to person number 1, then the second betrothal is a betrothal. So what happened in this story, very interestingly, Amrele Ime, the mother of the first, okay, we're going to have a whole thing with women here. The mother of the first husband or the first betrother comes over and she says, this happened, let's say in January was the first one and the second one did it in June. And Rav Chisda was looking into what's the price of this marble stone right now. But she comes and says, it doesn't matter what the price is now. It matters what the price was then. then it was worth a shavapruta. Now, we don't know if she's telling the truth or lying. So Amar La, Rav Chisda says to her, Lav kol kaminech de asar la'abatcha. You don't have the power. We can't believe you to forbid this, your potential, who may be your daughter-in-law, to forbid her to somebody else. We don't trust you on this. Why don't we trust you? Because we have a precedent for not trusting this kind of testimony. Turning now to Amud Bet. Lav hainu de Yehudi te bitu de Rabbi Chia. Isn't this not similar to the story of Yehudit? We're going to see a very interesting story. The wife of Rabbi Chia, who was a very big Talmid Chacham. Dehaviat latzar leida. She was in the middle of labor. She was apparently, according to Rashi, having twins. Comes up somewhere else that she has these twin sons. She must have, and twin daughters, I think. Or I'm not sure if the daughters were twins also, but there were two sisters also. Anyway, she was likely in labor with twins. Terrible pain, right? If you remember, we talked about the Yoledet who brings us a sin offering. Why does she do it? According to one of the opinions, because she curses in birth that she's, in childbirth that she swears she's never going to have another child again. So anyway, what happens here? She's in the middle of labor and is in terrible pain. And what does she say? Amrale, and she's Amrale. So she said in the middle of childbirth, all she wants is a divorce. Okay, perhaps she didn't understand much about birth control and she doesn't want to have any more children. So she screams out and she says the following. By the way, just so you know, I'm going to tell you the truth now, which is Amrali, my mother told me, the kibel bach avu, okay, quote, kibel bach avuch kiddushe kizutra. Your father, she's saying, the mother said to me that your father, meaning Yehudit's father, accepted a Kiddushin proposal on her behalf before she married Rabbi Chia, which means that she's illegitimately married to Rabbi Chia. And that means that he has to divorce her because she's a married woman. Okay, again, not married, but betrothed, which is basically like a married woman. And Amar La, what did they say to her at the time when she did this? Rabbi Chia says to her, Lav kol kamina de'imech de'asar le'ilavai. Your mother has no power. If your mother, first of all, it's hearsay, but forgetting about that, even if your mother testified to that, she has no power to forbid you to me. Okay? We don't trust her in this situation. Okay? And basically, we're not going to accept that testimony to forbid you to me. You're already married to me. We have a chazaka on this. Likewise, in the previous situation, she's already married to the second guy. And therefore, the mother-in-law has no power to basically say it was worth a pruta back then. To which they say, Amar le Rabbanan le Rav Chisda. Well, the rabbis come and question this and say to Rav Chisda, Amai, why not? All of a sudden, the rabbis bring in some extra thing that we didn't know, which is, it's not just that the mother-in-law said this, right? Or the mother of this, the first man who betrothed her said this, but we heard, now, again, we don't have the witnesses in front of us, but we heard these witnesses who are now living in this place called Edith. They're obviously too far away to get them right now. But there's a rumor that they also claimed that it was worth a pruta way back in January at the first betrothal. So, to which Rav Chisda answers, that doesn't affect me in any way. Okay, these guys aren't here. They're not here in front of me right now, so it doesn't help me. There's some rumor. Lav, and now he brings out, this is his style apparently here, he brings out another precedent to prove his point. Lav hainu de Rabbi Chanina, is this not Rabbi Chanina? Da Amar Rabbi Chanina said, Da Amar Rabbi Chanina, Eideh b'tzad istan v'te'aser. You need to know some background here. There's a halacha that if a Kohen's wife gets taken into captivity, there's always a concern when women get taken by non-Jewish captors that they were raped. So if a non-Jewish woman is raped, if a non-Jewish man rapes a woman, or anybody actually rapes a woman, when she's married to a Kohen, it's this very difficult halacha to sit with, but she's not allowed to go back to her husband. You can't marry a woman or be married to a woman, remain married to a woman who was raped by somebody else. So if a woman's taken into captivity, we assume she was raped. However, if we don't know she was taken into captivity and she comes forward and says, by the way, I was taken into captivity and I wasn't raped, we trust her because it's called hapesha asar hu hapesha itir. The one who theoretically could have forbidden herself to her husband actually also permits herself. So since we don't know from anyone else that she was taken into captivity, we basically let this go and we basically say, well, we trust you, okay? Because we assume that you're telling the truth also about the fact that you weren't raped. So we let her remain with her husband. So now about this topic, Rabbi Chanina said, it's even if there's witnesses in the north, he says, are we going to forbid her? In other words, are we going to forbid her on the, like, maybe, let's say there's a rumor. Okay, so the whole reason we believe her is because we don't know from anywhere else that she was taken into captivity. But if there's rumors spreading that there's witnesses all the way up in the north, far away from here, who can't come and testify, that she was taken into captivity, we don't view that as if there's witnesses. So likewise, in our case, we're not going to view it that there's witnesses just because there was some rumor going around that it was worth a shava pruta, so we're not going to assume that she's married. Same thing. To which Abai and Rava said, Lo sfira lahada Rav Chisda. We don't hold by what Rav Chisda said. Okay, it's not actually them talking, it's the Gemara telling us that Abai and Rava don't hold by what he said. Because in Mikilu b'shvuya, diminav lanafsha gabe shabai, neka be'eshet ish, he distinguishes and says these are not the same thing. By shvuya, we're going to be more lenient. Why? Because generally women make themselves look disgusting. They don't want, and imagine you were taken into captivity. You would obviously not want to be raped. So you'd make yourself look as disgusting and ugly as possible so that they wouldn't want to rape you. Now, it might not help you, but because we assume that they do that, there's a likelihood that they really weren't raped. And therefore, the whole issue, now the commentaries say this basically knocks her down to a Rabbanan issue. We're only worried on a rabbinic level that maybe something happened. So that we can be lenient about. But our case is a Torah issue. We're not going to be mekel by Eshet Ish, by a married woman. Maybe she really was betrothed. And therefore, we're going to be concerned that maybe the first man really did betroth her with a pruta, was worth a pruta at the time. And therefore, we're not going to allow her to remain married to the second guy. So basically, they go against Rav Chisda and basically say we're going to believe the first woman enough to basically forbid her to the second husband. And you can't say that that the mother isn't strong enough, that her testimony isn't believed to forbid her to the second husband. To which the Gemara now comes up with the continuation of the story. So Rav Chisda said she can stay married to the second guy, and Rav and Abai said, we don't agree with you. In the end, she stayed married, I guess, based on Rav Chisda's psak. They had descendants of this family in Sura. The rabbis wouldn't let their kids marry. Okay, the rabbis basically said this family is mamzerim or safek mamzerim. Don't marry them because maybe she really was married to the first guy. Now we go back to our two opinions. It's not because he holds like Shmuel that maybe somewhere in the world it was worth a shava pruta. That was the first opinion we saw. But because he held like Abai and Rava, that we actually do believe the woman to forbid, because we have to be stringent because it's a topic, it's a doraita issue, and therefore they were strict with their descendants. Seems actually kind of difficult for those descendants. They now became mamzerim or potential, safek mamzerim. Next story. That was two stories. Now we're on story number 3. He betrothed a woman with a myrtle branch in the shuk. Shachar Rav Acha Bar Huna lekamei de Rav Yehuda. Rav Acha Bar Huna sends to lekamei de Rav Yosef in front of Rav Yosef. Ki agavna, the following. He said, Ki agavna mai. What do we do with this guy? Are they betrothed? Or are they not betrothed? Because it's not really worth a pruta. So Shalach le nagde Shalach le. He sends him 2 responses. Number 1, nagde kirav. This guy should get lashes, like Rav said, which we're going to have to see in a minute why. V'itzrich gita k'Shmuel. And because of Shmuel, maybe somewhere else this myrtle branch is worth a lot of money. I'd imagine before the Sukkot, it's worth a lot of money, right? Everybody needs hadassim, the price goes up. So maybe, right, this person needs to get like Shmuel because maybe there's a place where it's worth more and therefore she's mekudesh. Now, let's go back to why he gets lashes like Rav. The Rav mangid amakadesh b'shuka. Rav gave lashes to those who betrothed in the shuk. Okay? He said, we're going to have a whole list that Rav gave lashes to. Number 1, you can't do Kiddushin in the shuk. That's not an appropriate thing. Go get married at a wedding hall, right? Don't do this as if it's not. It's kind of like we saw before. If you don't give her more than a pruta, it's going to look like, if you only give her a pruta, it's going to look like women aren't worth anything. Like you can't just quickly do a betrothal like that in the middle of the shuk. Not appropriate. Number 2, and that was what he did, so therefore he should get lashes. In the meantime, we have this whole long list of what Rav gave lashes for. Al de Mekadesh b'bia, someone who betrothed someone through bia. through sexual relations, right? We talked about that we were going to get to this. Rav said you get lashes for doing that. That's not an appropriate way of betrothal. If you do it without making some arrangement before. If you give a get and then cancel before it gets to the woman, this takes us back to the 4th chapter in Gittin, where you could theoretically do this, but you shouldn't do that. Someone who they forced to give a get, and he goes to give it willingly, but he's not really giving it willingly, but he knows they're going to beat him up if he doesn't give it willingly. So before he goes to give the get, he makes an announcement to a bunch of people, and he says, by the way, I'm going to pretend that I'm doing this willingly, but I'm really not doing it willingly. And that raises a whole, suffix about whether the get's a good get or not. By the way, nowadays, they make the person say, I cancel any announcement I made about this get. Okay, when they force someone to give a get, someone gives a get, they make him say in general, just in case he gave some sort of moda'ah to prevent this. That comes from here. If the rabbis came to bring someone to court and he doesn't go and he beats him up, so he gets lashes. If the rabbis put you in excommunication for 30 days because you didn't do something and then you didn't do it after the 30 days are over, you get lashes. And a chatan, a son-in-law who lives in his mother-in-law's house. The Rashi says, what's the concern with living in the mother-in-law's house? There's some concern that he might end up sleeping with his mother-in-law because there's often a good relationship between a son-in-law and a mother-in-law. This is not always true, but right. And therefore, and it's certainly not true that there's usually concern for sexual impropriety. The Rambam actually puts this in a totally different context. He puts it in the context of you shouldn't have sexual relations with your wife when you go to an inn. Okay, this is in Hilchot Isurei Biyah. When you go to an inn, because in the inn, there's other people there, right? Like a hotel, and you're with other people, and it's like not exactly appropriate. Likewise, if you live in your father-in-law's house, it's not appropriate to engage in sexual relations there. Imagine also they have much smaller quarters, and they were sharing quarters with other people, right? Not big houses like many people have now. Not everybody, but now we're living differently for sure, the average person than then. So therefore, it's a brazen act to basically live there. The Ravid actually comments on the Rambam and says if he gives you a separate house, that's a different story. So that's an interesting machloket, what the reason is here. In any case, they say, Didayer in chalaflo. Sounds like only if you live there, but if you just pass by there, like go there once in a while, it's okay. But wait, we have a story where it's actually forbidden even to do that. We're now off on a total tangent because we're talking about what Rav gave lashes for. We got there because of this person who betrothed the woman in the shuk. Now we're getting off on a tangent. There was a son-in-law who went past the door of his mother-in-law's house and they gave him lashes. So they say, that's not a regular case. That was just a unique case. Rav Sheshet, there was already rumors going around about something going on with the mother-in-law, and that's why he got lashes, but not a normal person, only for living there. Now back to this list of Rav about all the things they get lashes for. There's now a debate about what actually Rav gave lashes for. Really, he didn't give lashes for all these things. Only the person who's Makadish his wife with intercourse, below Shiduche, without a previous arrangement. Only on that. Some people say, even with Shiduche, still he was against Makadish Babiyah, and we give people lashes for doing it because it looks like Pritsut. It's not an appropriate manner of dealing with things. Okay, next story. Story number 1, 2, 3, 4. I think we're up to. Story number 4. Okay, we're going to finish with the story today. We're actually going to end in the middle. He betrothed a woman with a mat made of the myrtle branches or myrtle. Amrule, they said to him, but there isn't a shavapruta in there. Amar lahu, he said to them, what do you mean? It wasn't the mat I was giving her to betroth her with. It was the money inside the mat. There's 4 zuzim inside. That's enough to betroth her with. Shakalta ve'ishtika. So she kept it with her and she was silent. She didn't say, oh, I accept the Kiddushin. Now she did accept the mat though, but she accepted the mat not knowing that it was for betrothal. And then when she just keeps it and doesn't return it and is silent, the question is, did she agree to the betrothal or not? Now, without her agreement, she's not betrothed. Amarava, this is called being silent after the time when the money was given. And we've learned elsewhere, any silence, Any silence after the ma'ot, after money was given, is not considered anything. Amar Rava Manami. Rava says, where do I get this from? Titania, we're going to see from this following bright, and we won't see the whole thing today. We'll get started. We'll see that in the next daf. Amar La can see sela zoba pikadon. If someone says to a woman, take this sela to watch my sela, my money, and then chazar va'amar la hitkachili, and then he says hitkachili bo, I want you to be betrothed to me for the money I gave you previously. Bishat matamaot, if he said the words hitkachili bo as he was giving her the money, and she accepts it, then it's mekudeshet, she's betrothed. But if it's la'achar matamaot, after she got the money already, then ratzta mekudeshet lo ratzta ena mekudeshet. If she wants it, then mekudeshet. But if she doesn't, then not. Now, we don't know what this means, ratzta lo ratzta. So my ratzta, my lo ratzta. Ilema, if we say ratzta means da amra in, that she said yes, and lo ratzta is da amra lo, and then we wouldn't learn anything about what if she was silent. Well, then, Michlal de Reisha, ki amra lo nami havu kiddushin. Then it would sound like in the first case, if she says no, right, then it would still be kiddushin, because only in the second case, la'achar matam ma'ot, she has to express her thing, and that obviously can't be true. Amai v'haka amra lo, she obviously said no. So we'll stop right here because we're already into tomorrow's daf, and we'll we'll pick up from here in the Shabbat daf about how to explain this and how this teaches you about silence after matam ma'ot isn't good. Okay, doesn't mean that she agreed. So again, quick review of our daf. We finished up with Beit Shammai. We got to the 4 possibilities of which one of them was definitely rejected. The others kind of stood, which is why did Beit Shammai say a dinar and not a pruta? Then we got to Beit Hillel with the pruta, and we said that Rav Yosef says pruta, any kind of value, even if a pruta is worth less in a different time, to which we had a whole big rejection of that. And then we saw that the isar could fluctuate in value, but a pruta always stayed at 192 dinarim. And then, even though there was a debate about what its relationship was to the isar, then we had a number of cases. We had the first, right? We said about Shmuel. Shmuel said you have to be concerned that even if it's not a shefa pruta here, maybe it's worth a pruta somewhere else. Now we're moving off of money and moving to object. They might be valued less here than they are somewhere else. And therefore, you have to be worried at least about Kiddushin Safek. So then we brought a case and said, why were you trying to come up with the exact value? Maybe it's worth something somewhere else. And we said, no. That was only Kiddushin Safek. I was talking about Kiddushin Vadai. Then we had the man with the blue stone, with the 2 marriages. And then the mother said, oh, at the time it was worth more. And then we said, right, we had a debate between Rav Chisda and Abai and Rava whether or not we could believe her. Then we went on, and from there we got into some other things. Then we went on to the story about the person who did it in the shuk with a myrtle branch. So we said, number 1, Kiddushin Safek, because maybe it's worth something somewhere else. And he gets lashes because he shouldn't have betrothed her in the shuk. And then we had a whole long list of what Rav gave lashes for people who betrothed people in the shuk. And then we had a debate about what exactly, was it all those cases or was it really only 1 or 2? And then we got to this case about the mat, where he gives her the mat, but what he really meant was the money inside, but he didn't say so at the time. That's, by the way, similar to a woman who got a get that we learned in Gittin and didn't know it was a get. We also say that's not valid. Even though there you don't even need her agreement, but still we said it wasn't valid because she didn't know what it was, and she has to understand, she has to leave the home. She might not have understood it. With that, we'll end today's daf, and we'll get to wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom, and in the Shabbat daf, we will get to the continuation. Shabbat Shalom.